Okay, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us as we look at the latest media comparison study. So I've often been asked, is there a study that measures reach and time spent for an array of media platform, a syndicated study? There was, once upon a time, and GfK had a syndicated offering called Multimedia Mentor, and we actually used that in 2014 and 15 for our media comparison presentation for the reach and time spent component, and then we asked additional questions, attitudinal questions. But in fall 2015, it was the last year for the syndicated service. They said that they were going to reformat it. It's like a restaurant that closes and then say under construction, but they never came back. There are other studies that compare a few media platforms. I mean, Nielsen has their total audience report where they compare the platforms that they measure. But to our knowledge, there's no organization that compares the major platforms, which include traditional media like TV and print, as well as digital for time spent and reach. So starting in 2016, TVB commissioned GfK to do that multimedia study for us. Its purpose was to gain an understanding of media usage, reach, and time spent across traditional and digital platforms and within market segments. Now, these are the media platforms that were measured. You could see here's TV, which is broadcast, cable, and streaming, radio, print, newspapers, and magazines, and all of these digital platforms. Please note that we have separate questions for radio and digital radio, which, by the way, is not the case for Nielsen, who, when they're looking at their report, combines all of those into one number. I'd also like to point out that respondents did not have to watch TV to be included in this study. They could have spent time with email or search and been included in the study. Often we see these big numbers that venues cite their reach numbers, but the potential reach. So, for example, YouTube's monthly video reach, and this is for the month of November according to ComScore, is 80%. It's 80% for 71.9 billion videos, and even on a monthly basis, I don't know anyone who watches a billion videos. That is the potential reach. It's really not descriptive of what individual people use on a daily basis. Even with television, people have their select media channels. The latest Nielsen study that looked at this says out of the 200 TV channels that are receivable to a household, only 15 channels are watched per week on average. That's per week. So the media comparison study focuses on the individual and their one-day use of media platforms. For all of those platforms that I showed you earlier, we asked the question for each one, thinking about your use of media, whatever media it is, yesterday in any location for about how long did you use that media during each of these time periods? And then we break the day into 4 parts, starting from 5 a.m. and going through 1 a.m. And they can or cannot fill in the number of minutes that they watch. If they put in even 1 minute, they are included into the reach number. For the digital platforms, we asked separate questions for each device. So this is a chart of the time spent for computers. We'll ask questions about social media and email and search and radio. We do the same thing for smartphones and the same thing for tablets. And we combine all of these numbers for each of the devices together. Otherwise, every chart that we put up is going to look like this or worse. But just know that this is how we get it. So jog their memory. We ask about each individual device. I also like to point out on the chart, if you notice, there's a lot of time that's spent on these devices that are not video. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So the interviews were collected via opt-in sample through JFK's knowledge panel. Not to get into the weeds, they go to great lengths to make sure that it's truly projectable, and one of the things they do is using an address-based probability sample. Our sample for the study was 2,250 adults 18 plus, 2,100 were English speaking, and then we augmented that with 150 Spanish speaking Hispanic, age 18 and up. It was a 15-minute online quantitative survey, and because we are measuring people's media usage, care was taken to have an equal number of respondents reporting on each individual day so that we're not going to be overweighting any one day. There are two parts to the survey. There's the time spent with media and the reach, and then we also have second where we go in and ask attitudinal questions and an additional usage question. The interviews took place over 2 weeks from November 8th through the 21st. So what did we find about reach? Well, if you look at the top bar, the light blue, that's broadcast and cable combined, and that's a reach of 81%. The dark blue, broadcast TV by itself, has a reach of 80%. And then there's email at 69, and then in the 50s we have radio at 57, followed closely by social media, cable TV at 55, search at 53, and then it drops down to the 30s and later to the teens. That's the percent reached yesterday. So we said that TV, broadcast, and cable has a reach of 81%. If you add on to that the streaming of TV programs and movies that are done on the TV screen, that number goes up to 85%. And if you add on to that number the amount of streaming of TV programs and movies on PC, smartphone, and tablets, that goes up to 88%. I want to point out that when we ask the question about streaming, we do not differentiate whether it's ad-supported or not ad-supported. It's a general question about the streaming of TV programs. And as you all know, Netflix is the 10-pound gorilla in this arena. So a lot of that additional reach, in all probability, is on venues that do not accept advertising. When we look at the reach by category, we did include questions in our survey that allowed us to identify car buyers, urgent care users, home remodelers, in-store shoppers, voters, online shoppers, QSR casual dining, and home buyers. Actually, we will be breaking separate decks out, preparing individual decks on each of these categories, but I'm going to just give you some highlights throughout this presentation. So this is the reach by category. So we said in general the reach for broadcast and cable was 81%. For car buyers, that one-day reach is 86%, urgent care 85%. And if you overlay this on the broadcast reach, what you see is that broadcast TV is TV's primary reach engine. Broadcast reach for each of these categories is within a point, it's very close to the total reach for broadcast and cable. We asked respondents the question, if you could choose only 5 networks, which 5 would you choose? And we gave them about 50 choices. That was between broadcast and cable. Most of them were cable networks. They also could write in an answer, so they could pick whatever they wanted. And we picked the highest rated cable networks to include. So what did they say? Out of the 5 networks, which ones would they choose? Well, the dark blue are broadcast. And we love all of our children equally, so we're not going to share which one is Network A, Broadcast Network A, Broadcast Network B, and Broadcast Network C and D. But what you will see is that the numbers are very high. It's 44% for A and B pick them. And then C is 39%, and Network D is 33%. Yes, there was a cable network that was picked, but only 14% did pick them. So not only are they the broadcast, the top 4, they're far and above a greater choice than any cable network. As I mentioned, if someone filled out that they had 1 minute of use of any of these media types, they were included in the REACH number. The REACH figure does not differentiate whether somebody used a media platform for 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 5 hours, but time spent does. I think that time spent is a better measure of engagement because it shows you the amount of time that people are willing to invest with a media platform. And people spend the most time with television. So that top line is broadcast and cable. It's 5 hours and 24 minutes. Most of that is broadcast. That's followed by cable. When you get into the non-TV, you're dealing with an hour for radio, an hour and 6 minutes, email, an hour and 2 minutes, as the same for social media, and streaming TV at 51 minutes, and all the others go from a half hour then down to 2 minutes. Most time spent with TV programs is on linear TV. So there's the 5 hours and 24 minutes for broadcast and cable for TV. You do have 51 minutes for streaming on a TV set, and 28 minutes for streaming on a PC and a smartphone and a tablet. But again, bear in mind that most probably a large chunk of this streaming does not accept ads. If we look at this based on device, so let's just look now at the TV device, and we have the programming that I showed you on this other slide. We have at the bottom, that's 5 hours and 24 minutes, the broadcast and cable, and then the overlay of that is the streaming of television programs. So that's over 6.25 hours. If you look at the online devices, you see that on the bottom, for computers, it's almost 3 hours that they spend per day with it, and over 2 hours with smartphones, and about a half an hour for the tablet. But if you go back to that first chart, one of the charts that I showed you earlier on with that pie and all the fragmenting uses of those devices, you will remember there wasn't that much that was on online video exclusively. In fact, online video exclusively is under an hour for all of these three put together, and as we said, some of that does not accept advertising. Now we get into the second part of the survey where we asked attitudinal questions and some usage questions. Which of the following sources, if any, would you say is your primary source for news? Now this is any news. This is not local news. 26% said local broadcast TV news, 14% said cable news, and 12% said network broadcast news. If you add that 12 to the 26, you have a higher number for broadcast news in general. And social media is 10%. Actually, I find this, it is what it is. This is what was reported. I find it a little bit scary that more people are picking for their primary news source social media than radio stations and local newspapers and any of these other platforms. But you'll see that social media plays a fairly prominent role in media usage and some of the following charts. Not this one, because this is talking about local news, and in local news, far and away, it is local television at 40%. And third place is local TV news websites and apps at 8%, both of which are assets of our stations. What about trust? Do you agree with the statement we asked? I trust the news that I see or hear on this media source. So 79% said that they trusted local broadcast TV news. And that was followed up right behind it by local newspapers at 78 and then radio at 73. If you follow me all the way to the right to this dark gray column, you'll see the percentage of people that trust cable news. That's 59%. So go from 79 for local broadcast news to 59 for cable news channels. That's a difference of 20%. And then at the bottom of the barrel, is social media. Very few people trust social media. We've seen this from other studies. So they use social media, but they don't trust the content that they see on social media. Which source of news do you feel is the most involved in your community? 46% said local broadcast news. That was double that of newspapers. Some questions on motivation and influence. From which of the following sources are you most motivated to learn more about a product or brand? Television ads with 31%. That's the top motivator. That was followed by social media at 16.7%. And then you have magazines, email, and newspapers and direct mail, and search closely grouped together. If we take a look at this just top line by category, so we have this page and the next page because we have 8 categories, and again, we're just giving you the top line. So for car buyers and home remodelers and QSR casual dining, what we see is that regardless of the category, TV is the top motivator. Coming in second is social media, and then the third and the fourth and the fifth will vary depending on the category. So for car buyers, search and direct mail, 3 and 4. But for casual dining, which is down here on the right, it's email and search are the 3 and the 4. And the same thing holds true for in-store shoppers, online shoppers, urgent care, and voters. TV ads are the top motivator. Which advertising medium do you feel most influences you to make a purchase decision? Now, we're not just asking about getting more information about a product, but actually influencing the purchase. Television at 31%. Number one, not even a close second, social media at about 14%. Then newspapers at about 11%, email, and then it goes down to 7, and then fractions. If we take a look at this by category, we see the same story. TV is the top motivator, is the top influencer, of purchase decisions for car buyers, for home buyers, for home remodelers, and QSR casual dining. And the same story for in-store shoppers and online shoppers and urgent care and voters. It is the top influencer. When it comes to TV and online and digital, it's not an either-or proposition. We're not going on record here, nor am I suggesting that advertisers should only go onto television. First of all, our stations have digital assets as well. It is more of an and situation than it's not either or, it's and, because the two can work together very nicely. So if you take a look at how the internet skews, you see that it peaks from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And if you take a look at television usage, it peaks in the evening. So the two complement each other. In addition, the content that's on digital platforms, a bit of it comes from broadcast. When we ask the question, have you read or watched local broadcast TV station content on a social media site? So in general, adults 18 plus, about a third of them, 34%, said that they did. For car buyers and home buyers, it was 43% said that they had watched local broadcast TV station content on a social media site. And we did our own analysis of YouTube using ComScore information. We took a look at, for the month of November, their unique viewers, which takes out duplication for that month. And then we went through and looked at all of the broadcast TV content that was on YouTube and took out the duplication from that as well. And we found that about a quarter of YouTube content is from broadcast television, 24%. In addition, television ads are motivation to do further research online. when we asked respondents, has an advertisement on television motivated you to go to the Internet? It's a direct question. Did it motivate you to go to the Internet to find out more information about that product or service? 66% of home remodelers said yes, 65% of car buyers. And there was a study that was done by Accenture. They had a cross-channel advertising attribution report. And what they found was, without TV's halo, average digital ROIs would decline. This is their chart over here and their numbers. And it says, for example, if you wouldn't have the TV component, paid search would go down 21%. Display would go down 18%. Short-term video would go down 7%, and standalone digital ROI would go down 18%. In fact, they said that 18% of the standalone digital ROI, which is attributed to digital, should really be attributed to television. Broadcast TV and broadcast websites can work together to increase reach, and also you will see that with the duplication, they can reinforce the message. So we talked about that television was 80.4 reach. The websites, the broadcast websites, are about 23% reach, of which 20% is duplication, which, as I said, is not a bad thing. It reinforces the message. And the added reach is 2.7%. When you're already in the 80s, it is very hard to build a tremendous amount of additional reach. This is off of a very high base. It's another story if you had a 30% reach or 40% reach. And if you think that 2.7 is so wide, it's not such a big number, I will tell you that it is, because if you take a look at the number for broadcast TV alone and how much was added with cable, cable added onto broadcast TV about a 1% reach. If you do broadcast TV and broadcast TV websites, you're adding on 2.7 reach. And depending on the category, that number could go even higher. So here we have car buyers. The number goes to 4.2% reach. Home remodelers, 3.8. What websites were they most likely to turn to when they need information about local news or events? Half of the respondents said local broadcast TV websites and apps, which is the same amount as all the others put together. Running second is local newspaper websites at 23%. We're going to take a look at some of these numbers by demographics, and I will tell you that TV has the highest reach for all ages, regardless. So we start here on the left with adults 18 to 34. We move over to 18 to 49, and then adults 25 to 54, and adults 35 plus. This first bar is total TV, which is broadcast and cable combined, and the dark blue column is broadcast only. So do 18 to 34-year-olds, is there a slightly lower reach for them than their older counterparts? Yes. But the reach for television is higher than any other platform. This is social media. It's higher than social media. It's higher than email. It's higher than search and radio. It's interesting that radio is actually skewing older. Once upon a time, before the digital age and social media, if you wanted to reach young adults, you would go on radio. And now that's been supplanted by social media and other digital platforms. There is cable, streaming TV, and then streaming other than TV, like the short form like YouTube, and all of the other platforms. So television has the highest reach regardless of the age, and you see differences among the platforms depending on the age, but TV is number one for reach. Again, someone can just be on any of these platforms for a minute to be included in the reach, and when you take a look at the time spent, the difference is really dramatic. There's nothing that comes close to television. Adults 18 to 34, here's social media, here's television. And yes, they do, adults 18 to 34 do spend less time with television than their older counterparts. In fact, I believe that they always have, even before digital. But they spend more time with television than any other media platform. And I think that is the key takeaway from this chart. When we asked adults 25 to 54 and adults 18 to 34 to choose their top 5 networks, 4 out of the 5 for both of them were broadcast. And the 5th was a cable network, but again, it was small numbers, 15% for adults 25 to 54 and 14% for adults 18 to 34. So we're going to concentrate on 25 to 54 now and 18 to 34. On the left, you have the percent that was reached in one day, yesterday, and on the right, you have the time spent. What you notice is that television is tops for reach, and then it comes email and social media at 60%, and then radio at 59% reach. When it comes to time spent after television, it's radio, and people spend 4 times as much with TV as they do with the next platform, radio. Social media, email, and streaming TV are all about 1 hour. Let's look at the same thing for adults 18 to 34. On the left is reach, on the right is time spent. The highest reach is television. But after television, it's social media, and then email. When it comes time spent, again, after television, the most time spent is social media, but still, adults 18 to 34 spend 3 times as much of the day with television as they do with social media. And what about content? Have you read or watched local broadcast TV station content on a social media site? So we said for adults 18 plus, it was 34%. The younger you are, the higher the percentage that answered yes to this question. 18 to 34-year-olds said 46% said yes. Adults 25 to 54, 44% said yes. Now let's take a look at African Americans and Hispanics. So African Americans are on the left and Hispanics are on the right, and we are looking at the percent that was reached yesterday. You will notice that television has the highest reach for African Americans and the highest reach for Hispanics. But after television, you'll see some changes. I mean, they both are high for email. But for African Americans, it's search, radio, and social media. For Hispanics, social media comes up before and then radio. You're going to see social media popping up for Hispanics and other questions on influence as well. If they could choose only 5 networks, what would they choose? African Americans, 4 out of the top 5 broadcast, 19% chose cable. For Hispanic, 5 out of the top 5 broadcast, 2 of which are Spanish broadcasts in place 2 and 3. But if you look at the Spanish speaking, it's all broadcast as well, but the top 3 are Spanish broadcast networks. Time spent. Let's first start with Hispanics. So Hispanics, the time spent, television is tops for both. The time spent with television for Hispanics is very similar to the average of adults 18 plus. For African Americans, they spend more time with television. We've seen this on other studies. It's not that Hispanics are below average, it's that African Americans are above average in the amount of time that they spend with television. And you see some other differences. After television, now within an hour is email, radio, streaming, TV, and then with 1 hour, social media. You see the greater importance for Hispanics, though slightly edging out, is streaming, TV, radio, and social media, and email at 51 minutes. From which of the following sources of advertising are you most motivated to learn about the advertised product? TV, 37.5 for African Americans, 33 for Hispanics, and then you see the influence of social media with Hispanics, which is not present with African Americans. It's the number 2. Which advertising medium most influences you to make a purchase decision? Far and away television, for Hispanics, the number 2, social media. So in summary of the reach and time spent, TV has the highest reach of all the media platforms studied. Most TV viewers of that reach are reached through broadcast TV. People spend the most time with TV, and if they only had to pick 5 networks, the top 4 are on broadcast TV, with the exception of Hispanics, where 5 out of the top 5 would be on broadcast TV. Looking at the attitudinal questions, we see that TV is the top advertising medium for purchase influence and motivating respondents to learn more about products. And local TV news is the most trusted news source. As we mentioned, social media is the least trusted news source. TV and digital complement each other, and broadcast TV and broadcast websites can synergistically work together and reinforce the message and increase reach. Local broadcast TV websites are turned to most for local news among local digital platforms. And when we look at demographics and categories, it doesn't matter what you pick. Television is tops for reach, and all demographics, including adults 18 to 34, spend at least 3 times more hours and minutes with a TV than the next closest media platform. The runner-up for time spent for adults 25 to 54 is radio. The second, though it's not a close second, after TV for 18 to 34-year-olds is social media. For all demographics and categories measured, TV is the top advertising medium for purchase influence and motivation. As I mentioned, we will be coming out, within 48 hours, we'll have the recording of this webinar, but up this afternoon, we will have this presentation, as well as we're working on these decks on an ongoing basis. We have the automotive deck that's finished, the voter deck that's finished, the home buyer deck, I believe that's also finished, yes, and the home remodelers. And that will all be up on our website today, and then we will continue to work on the shopping, urgent care, QSR, and casual dining, and we will also do breakouts of key demographics. So I thank you. That concludes the presentation, and I'm open for any questions. Please feel free to just type in and ask your questions. Okay, it says, do you have a reach number for YouTube from this study? Well, we had a number for those that use short form, and we use in the explanation that it was YouTube. And remember, we're dealing with just one day. And if you can take a look at all of the devices, the reach number for that, memorize all of them, but here we go. It was, sorry, I'm just looking for it without having to flip through all of the screens for you. It was 31% reach in one day. How do these figures differ from the prior TVB GFK study? For example, while TV is still number 1, are the numbers declining? Okay, so actually they are very, very similar for television as they were last year. In fact, the total television number is spot on. they're very close also for the broadcast number. I need to point out that when we took over from GFK would look at the hours of 6 a.m. to 12 midnight. And just this year, because for broadcast we have a lot that goes on before 6 a.m., we extended the hours from 5 a.m. to 1. And I think it's like now 1 percentage point higher for broadcast. But that could also, I wouldn't consider that significant. Last year was a 79 and this year is an 80. That could be rounding too. So they're very, very similar. What we are seeing is that social media is picking up a little bit more. Not dramatically, but it is increasing more than it did in the last study. Okay, was there any information that I found shocking or surprising? Well, we've been doing a couple of these studies. I find it very surprising, the main source of news, how many people pick social media over newspapers and radio. That I found that surprising, though it was close, but I did find that to be somewhat surprising. Can we have a copy of this for our staff? So I will just tell you again, because this is important, that this presentation will be up on our website this afternoon, though the recording won't be available till 48 hours from now, and we'll let you know when that is. Anyone who is a TVB member, please feel free to allow them to see this report, especially if salespeople are going out to visit car dealers. Please take a look at our automotive report. We ask that you not share this with non-members, except if you use this information to go call on an agency, because that's the advantage of being a TVB member, is that you get this information. The newspaper numbers being shown was the physical print newspaper or newspaper and their site. So we broke out, we had separate questions for the digital components of all of these media elements. So they were separate. When we said newspapers, if you look, I know I went very, very quickly. It's all going to be there for you. But when you get into the study, you'll be able to see that there are we have a digital print broken out separately. The numbers for newspaper sites were there on that one pie chart later on when we said where do they get their local news. When you delve in, you'll be able to see that there is a difference between the hard copy print and the digital print. Is there a study for the financial category? No, we did not include anything for that financial category. How was I able to determine the percentage of YouTube content that was from broadcast television? Very, very tedious, I will tell you. We went through every single contributor of YouTube with a fine-tooth comb. We had several people go through it and identified those that were from the broadcast. Then we had to send it over to ComScore to take out the duplication. It was a very, very tedious process, but that's how we came to that number. How much of an influence is email? Email was coming up high on the reach numbers. On the influence, it depended on the category. In general, it wasn't one of the top ones. It was number 4 for motivating to learn more. For influence, email was 11% as compared to television's 31%. And in some categories that, like home remodelers, that went up to 14%. In other categories, it didn't make the top 5. So it varies based on the category. As far as its influence as a purchase decision, email was number 4. It was at 9% as compared to television's 31%. And if you go in and take a look at the categories for quite a few of them, it would show up, but it would show up as fourth or fifth. Okay, someone is asking me to tell them what were the top networks. And we prefer to keep that, certainly we're not going to, if we're not going to give out the broadcast networks, we're not going to give out the cable networks. But I will tell you, as you most probably have guessed, that the cable network has a strong bearing in most cases, not all, to do with sports. Okay, not sure if you mentioned or not, but can you break out various demos? We will be going in, and we do all of this ourselves. We get all of this data ourselves, and then we have to plow through it and double check it and make sure that it's all correct. So our first priority was to get the categories available, and when we're done with that, then we will go and look at main demographics. We don't do every single demographic, but we do the main demographics, and that will be the charts will, the presentations will be there by demographic. Okay, if there are no other questions, I thank you very much for joining us. As I said, this will be all up and available for you this afternoon. Please feel free to use this wonderful study. I think it's a really good story for television. Have a great day.